You're joking, right? My voice cracked as I stared at the statement on my phone. My voice faltered as I stared at the statement on my phone, uttering, "You can't be serious, can you?" Every penny I'd spent years saving for a down payment gone. All the money I had meticulously saved over the years for a down payment had vanished. Where's my money? Maria. Maria, where is my money? My mother didn't even bother looking up from her coffee. Without even glancing up from her coffee, my mother responded, "Relax, Juliana. It went to something important." "Oh, calm down, Juliana," she said. "It was used for something significant. Important." I nearly choked. "It's all gone." "Where did it go?" "Significant," I gasped, almost suffocating. "It's completely gone." "What happened to it?" She glanced at Greg, my stepfather, who sat next to her with a smug grin, swirling his coffee like we were having a casual chat. She cast a look at my stepfather, Greg, who sat beside her, a self-satisfied smirk on his face, stirring his coffee as if we were engaged in a light conversation. "The party," Maria said, her tone dismissive, as if she'd just explained where the car keys were. "The celebration," Maria stated, her voice offhand, as though she were simply clarifying the location of the car keys. "We needed a little extra to make it special. We just required a bit more to make it extraordinary. You used my savings to pay for your anniversary party." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. "That was for my house." "You had no right." "You took my savings to finance your anniversary celebration." My grip on the phone tightened, my hands shaking. "That money was designated for my home." "You were completely out of line." Greg chuckled, finally chiming in. "Where are your parents?" he said, leaning back. "We don't owe you anything, Juliana. Families share. You'll get over it." Greg finally joined the conversation, leaning back with a chuckle. "We are your parents," he declared. "We don't owe you a thing, Juliana. Families pool resources. You'll recover from this. My name is Juliana, and for as long as I can remember, my mother and stepfather have treated me like a second-class citizen in my own family. I'm Juliana, and ever since I can recall, my mother and stepfather have made me feel like an inferior member of our family. My dad died when I was 12, leaving behind not just a void in my life, but a modest inheritance he'd hoped would give me a head start in adulthood. When I was 12, my father passed away, leaving not only a profound emptiness but also a small inheritance he intended to provide me with a solid start in adult life. He trusted Maria to handle it until I was old enough to use it responsibly. He entrusted Maria with managing it until I reached an age where I could use it wisely instead. She treated it like a family piggy bank. However, she treated it as if it were a communal savings fund for the family. For years, I stayed quiet, letting little infractions slide. For a long time, I remained silent, overlooking minor transgressions. I didn't say much when she dipped into the fund for emergencies or used it to cover Greg's credit card debt. I largely held my tongue when she accessed the funds for unexpected needs or to settle Greg's credit card balances. But this time was different. But this situation was distinct. This wasn't a couple $100 here and there. This wasn't just a few $100s taken sporadically. It was my entire down payment, nearly $25,000 blown on catering, decorations, and some overpriced venues so they could show off to their friends. It was my complete down payment to almost $25,000 squandered on food, adornments, and an exorbitantly priced location just so they could impress their acquaintances. I wasn't just angry. I was heartbroken. Beyond anger, I was devastated. I'd worked so hard to save that money, working extra shifts, skipping vacations, even living in a smaller apartment just to scrape together every dollar. I had put an immense effort to save that money, taking on additional shifts, foregoing holidays, and even residing in a more modest apartment just to accumulate every single dollar. And now, in one selfish move, they'd taken it all away. And now, with a single self-centered action, they had taken everything from me. I want it back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You're going to pay me back every cent. I want it returned, I stated, striving to maintain an even tone. You will reimburse me for every penny. Maria rolled her eyes, setting her mug down with a clink. Don't be so dramatic, Juliana. It's not like you're homeless. You can always save more. Maria scoffed, placing her mug down with a distinct sound. Don't be so theatrical, Juliana. You're not without a home. You can always accumulate more savings. It's not about that, I snapped. It's about the fact that you stole from me. That money was mine. That's not the point, I retorted sharply. The issue is that you stole from me. That money belonged to me. Greg smirked, clearly enjoying the show. Technically, it was your dad's money, and we're your parents. We're the ones who decide what's best for the family. Greg wore a knowing smile, evidently amused by the unfolding scene. Technically, that money was your father's. And since we're your parents, we're the ones who determine what's in the family's best interest. The word family hit me like a slap. The term family struck me forcefully. For years, they'd used that word to justify everything from borrowing money, without asking to dismissing my feelings whenever they crossed the line. For years. They had invoked that word to rationalize everything from taking money without permission to disregarding my feelings whenever they overstepped boundaries. But this wasn't family. This was theft. But this wasn't kinship. This was robbery. I'm not letting this go, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I won't let this slide, I declared, my voice quivering with fury. Do what you have to, Maria said with a shrug, picking up her coffee like she hadn't just ripped my dreams away. But don't expect us to apologize. We did what was necessary. Do what you deem necessary, Maria said, shrugging and resuming her coffee, as if she hadn't just shattered my aspirations. But don't anticipate an apology from us. We did what was required. I left their house that day, shaking the air in my lungs, thick with frustration. I departed their house that day, trembling, my lungs heavy with exasperation. Elena, my best friend, was the first person I called. My closest friend, Elena, was the first person I contacted. I spilled the whole story, pacing my tiny apartment as the reality of what had happened sank in. I recounted the entire ordeal, walking back and forth in my small apartment as the full impact of the situation registered. They're unbelievable, she said, her voice full of disbelief. How could they think this is okay? They're incredible, she exclaimed, her voice conveying utter disbelief. How could they possibly believe this is acceptable? Because they don't Care? I said bitterly. They've never cared. As far as they're concerned, I'm just a backup plan, something to use whenever it's convenient. Because they are indifferent, I replied with resentment. They have never cared. To them, I'm merely a contingency, something to exploit whenever it suits their convenience. What are you going to do? She asked. What will be your course of action? She inquired. I didn't have an answer yet. I hadn't formulated a response yet. Part of me wanted to scream at them until they understood how much they'd hurt me. A part of me desired to yell at them until they grasped the extent of the pain they had inflicted. Another part wanted to crawl into bed and pretend none of this was happening. Another part wished to retreat to bed and feign that none of this had occurred, but the strongest part, the part my dad raised to stand up for myself, knew exactly what needed to be done. But the most resilient part of me, the part my father had nurtured to assert myself, knew precisely what was required. I'm going to get my money back, I said, my voice firm. Even if it means calling the police, I will retrieve my money. I stated, my voice resolute, even if it entails contacting law enforcement. By the time I hung up with Elena, my anger had crystallized into determination. After I concluded my call with Elena, my anger had solidified into unwavering resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. I was not going to overlook this. Not on this occasion. Maria and Greg had crossed a line they couldn't, and I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter who kept quiet for the sake of family. My parents, Maria and Greg, had violated an irreversible boundary, and I was finished acting as the obedient daughter who remained silent for the sake of familial harmony. They stole from me. It was time to show them there were consequences. They stole from me. It was time to demonstrate that actions have repercussions. The next morning, I called the bank to confirm what I already knew. The following morning, I contacted the bank to verify what I was already aware of. Maria had accessed my savings account using an old joint authorization she'd somehow convinced me to keep years ago, just in case. Maria had gained entry to my savings account by utilizing an old joint authorization that she had. Years ago, somehow persuaded me to retain just in case. She transferred every last penny out 2 weeks before the party, with no intention of telling me. She emptied the account entirely 2 weeks prior to the party, with no intention of informing me. That's not legal, right? I asked the bank manager, my voice shaky but firm. That's illegal, isn't it? I asked the bank manager, my voice trembling but steady. It's a gray area, he admitted, his tone cautious since it was a joint account. She technically had access, but given the circumstances, it's worth pursuing legally, especially if the funds were earmarked for you. It's a nuanced situation, he conceded, his voice guarded. As it was a joint account, she technically had access, but considering the details, it's advisable to pursue legal action, particularly if the funds were specifically allocated for you. Thank you, I said, jotting down the details he provided. I'll be in touch. I appreciate your help, I said, noting the information he gave me. I'll contact you again. My next call was to Chloe, a lawyer Elena had recommended over coffee that afternoon. My subsequent call was to Chloe, an attorney Elena had suggested during our coffee meeting that afternoon. I explained everything, the savings account, the stolen money, and Maria's unapologetic response. I detailed the entire situation, the savings account, the misappropriated money, and Maria's unremorseful reaction. This isn't just unethical, it's potentially criminal. She said, once I finished, even with joint access, there are limits to what she can do with those funds, especially if you can prove they were specifically intended for your use. This is not only unethical, but potentially a criminal offense, she stated after I finished. Even with shared access, there are restrictions on how she can utilize those funds, particularly if you can demonstrate they were explicitly designated for your personal use. I nodded, hope flickering to life for the first time since this nightmare began. So, what's my next step? I nodded, a glimmer of hope appearing for the first time since this ordeal started. So, what should I do next? First, we'll file a report with the police to establish a paper trail, she said. Then we'll draft a formal demand for repayment. If they refuse, and something tells me they will, we can escalate to legal action. Firstly, we'll submit a report to the police to create an official record, she explained. Then we'll prepare a formal request for repayment. Should they decline it, I suspect they will, we can proceed with legal action. The thought of involving the police made my stomach turn. But when I thought about the hours I'd spent working overtime, the vacations I'd skipped, and the sacrifices I'd made to save that money, my resolve hardened. The idea of involving law enforcement made me queasy, but considering the numerous overtime hours I'd worked, the vacations I'd foregone, and the sacrifices I'd made to save that money, my determination solidified. Maria and Greg thought they could walk all over me because I was their daughter. It was time to prove them wrong. Maria and Greg believed they could take advantage of me because I was their daughter. It was time to show them otherwise. Filing the police report was both and oddly liberating. Submitting the police report was both unsettling and strangely freeing. Sitting across from the officer at the station, I recounted the entire story, showing him copies of the bank statements Chloe had helped me pull together. Seated opposite the officer at the station, I narrated the full account, presenting him with copies of the bank statements that Chloe had assisted me in gathering. So your stepmother accessed your account without your consent and used the money for personal expenses. The officer summarized, his pen poised over the form. So your stepmother gained access to your account without your permission and utilized the funds for her personal expenditures. The officer summarized, his pen hovering over the document. Yes, I said, my voice steady. She used it to pay for a party I had no idea about until after the fact. Yes, I confirmed, my voice unwavering. She used it to fund a party I wasn't even aware of until after it happened. He nodded, jotting down notes. This falls under unauthorized use of funds. Given the circumstances, we'll open a case and follow up with your parents. You'll want to let your lawyer know so she can coordinate on her end. He nodded, making notes. This is categorized as unauthorized use of funds. Considering the situation, we will open a case and contact your parents. You should inform your lawyer so she can coordinate her efforts. As I left the station, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't letting them get away with it. As I exited the station, I couldn't help but experience a slight feeling of contentment. For once, I was not allowing them to escape accountability. The fallout began 2 days later when Maria called me, her voice tight with anger. The repercussions started 2 days later when Maria called me, her voice strained with rage. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. "The police just showed up asking about your precious savings." "What in the world is this?" she demanded. "The police just arrived, inquiring about your precious savings." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said calmly. "You stole from me, so now you're dealing with the consequences." "It's precisely what it appears to be," I stated calmly. "You stole from me, so now you are facing the repercussions." "Stole?" she scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Juliana. We're family." "That money was for all of us." "Stole," she snorted. "Don't be absurd, Juliana. We're family. That money was meant for everyone in the family." "No, it wasn't," I shot back. "It was for me. Dad left it for me, and you had no right to touch it." "No, it wasn't," I retorted. "It was meant for me. Dad bequeathed it to me, and you had absolutely no right to interfere with it." Greg chimed in from the background, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're taking this seriously. What are you going to do? Take us to court?" Greg's sarcastic voice cut in from the background. "Oh, please, don't tell me you're actually serious about this. What's your plan to sue us?" "If I have to," I said, "you brought this on yourselves. If necessary," I stated. "You are responsible for this situation." Maria let out a bitter laugh. "You're being dramatic." "Do you really think this is going to get you anywhere?" Maria emitted a cynical laugh. "You're overreacting. Do you honestly believe this will achieve anything for you?" "We'll see," I replied before hanging up. "We shall see," I responded before ending the call. Meanwhile, Chloe was working behind the scenes to prepare for the next step. At the same time, Chloe was making preparations discreetly for the subsequent phase. She'd already sent a formal demand letter to Maria and Greg, outlining the amount they owed and giving them a deadline to repay it. She had already dispatched a formal demand letter to Maria and Greg, specifying the sum they owed and setting a repayment deadline. As expected, they ignored it. Predictably, they disregarded it. "They're doubling down," Chloe said during one of our meetings, which is exactly what we want. "The more resistant they are, the worse it'll look for them if this goes to court." "They're intensifying their stance," Chloe explained during one of our meetings, "which is precisely what we desire. Their increased defiance will only worsen their position if this proceeds to court, and if they refuse altogether." I asked. "And if they completely refuse?" I inquired. "Then we escalate," she said simply. "But don't worry, you're in a strong position. Between the police report, the bank records, and your father's will, we've got more than enough to back up your case. Then we intensify our actions," she stated plainly. "But rest assured, you are in a favorable position. With the police report, the bank records, and your father's will, we have ample evidence to support your case." Her confidence bolstered mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. Her assurance strengthened my own. After years, I finally felt like I had the advantage. Maria and Greg had always treated me like I was powerless, but now I was proving that I wasn't. Maria and Greg had consistently treated me as if I were powerless, but now I was demonstrating that I was not. The final straw came when Greg posted a smug photo from their anniversary party on social media. complete, with a caption thanking their friends and family for making the night so special. The breaking point occurred when Greg uploaded a self-satisfied photograph from their anniversary celebration on social media, accompanied by a caption expressing gratitude to their friends and family for making the evening so memorable. The image of him raising a champagne glass, standing next to Maria in her rented designer dress, made my blood boil. The sight of him raising a champagne glass next to Maria in her borrowed designer gown infuriated me. They were still reveling in their victory, blissfully unaware of what was coming next. They were still enjoying their triumph, completely oblivious to what awaited them. Enjoy it while it lasts, I muttered to myself, saving the photo as evidence. Savor it while you can, I whispered to myself, preserving the photograph as proof. When I showed it to Chloe later that day, she shook her head, a wry smile tugging at her lips. They're making this way too easy, she said. Let's make sure that champagne toast is one they'll never forget. Later that day, when I presented it to Chloe, she shook her head, a cynical smile playing on her lips. They're simplifying this significantly, she commented. Let's ensure that champagne toast becomes an unforgettable one for them. It was a week later when the fallout finally came to a head. A week later, the consequences finally reached their climax. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. I was at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, when my phone vibrated. It was Chloe. They've been served, she said, her voice crisp with satisfaction. The demand letter is now officially part of the case file, and the police are following up with a formal notice of investigation. They've received the papers, she announced, her voice sharp with triumph. The demand letter is now officially included in the case file, and the police are issuing a formal notice of investigation. I leaned back, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. How do you think they'll react? I reclined, experiencing a combination of solace and expectation. What do you anticipate their reaction will be? Oh, they'll panic, Chloe said. And when people panic, they either double down or crumble. Either way, we win. Oh, they'll panic, Chloe stated. And when individuals panic, they either become more entrenched or collapse. Regardless, we prevail. Sure enough, Maria called me later that day, her tone frantic and defensive. Predictably, Maria called me later that day, her voice agitated and guarded. Juliana, what are you doing? She demanded. You're really going through with this? You'd put your own family through the legal system over a little misunderstanding. Juliana, what is your intention? She demanded. Are you truly pursuing this? You would subject your own family to legal proceedings over a minor misinterpretation. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Maria, you stole from me, and if you thought I'd just let it slide, you were wrong. I inhaled deeply, maintaining a calm voice. This was not a misunderstanding, Maria. You stole from me, and if you believed, I would simply overlook it. You were mistaken. We didn't steal, she shouted. We borrowed it. It was for the party. You should be proud. We could celebrate as a family. We didn't steal, she yelled. We merely borrowed it. It was for the celebration. You should be proud that we could celebrate as a family. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter and sharp. Celebrate. You mean flaunt my money in front of your friends while I'm stuck scrambling to rebuild my savings? No, Maria, that's not family. That's selfishness. I couldn't resist a bitter, sharp laugh. Celebrate. You mean show off my money to your friends while I'm struggling to replenish my savings? No, Maria, that's not what family does. That's selfishness. Greg grabbed the phone from her, his voice oozing with condescension. You're blowing this out of proportion, kiddo. Nobody's going to side with you on this. We're your parents. We've sacrificed for you. Don't you think you owe us a little gratitude? Greg snatched the phone from her, his voice dripping with arrogance. You're overreacting, dear. No one will support you on this. We're your parents. We've made sacrifices for you. Don't you think you owe us some appreciation, gratitude? My voice cracked, anger bubbling to the surface. For what? For taking what wasn't yours. For mocking me when I asked you to pay me back? No, Greg. The only thing I owe you is accountability. And trust me, you're about to get it. Gratitude. My voice broke, rage rising within me. For what exactly? For taking what wasn't yours? For ridiculing me when I asked for repayment? No, Greg. The only thing I owe you is accountability, and believe me, you're about to receive it. That evening, the police knocked on their door. That night, the police arrived at their doorstep. Chloe had warned me not to expect fireworks. It wasn't an arrest, just a formal inquiry. I couldn't help imagining their faces as the officers explained the seriousness of the situation. Chloe had cautioned me not to anticipate dramatic events. It was merely a formal inquiry, not an arrest yet. I couldn't help but visualize their expressions as the officers elucidated the gravity of the situation. Sure enough, Maria called me again, this time with a completely different tone. As expected, Maria contacted me once more, her demeanor entirely altered this time. Juliana, please, she said, her voice shaking. You didn't need to bring the police into this. We can talk about it. Figure something out. Juliana, I beg you, she pleaded, her voice trembling. You didn't have to involve the police in this. We can discuss it. Find a solution. We tried talking, I reminded her. You laughed in my face and told me to get over it. Now it's out of my hands. We attempted to discuss it. I reminded her. You scoffed at me and told me to move past it. Now it's beyond my control. Her voice cracked. This could ruin us. Do you really want to do that to your own mother? Her voice faltered. This could destroy us. Do you truly wish to inflict that upon your own mother? The irony of her words hit me like a slap. Your own mother, as if she hadn't already ruined the trust between us, as if her actions didn't scream that she cared more about appearances than about me. The hypocrisy of her statement struck me forcefully. Your own mother, as if she hadn't already destroyed the confidence between us, as if her behavior didn't overtly convey that she valued outward impressions more than she valued me. I didn't do this to you, I said quietly. You did it to yourself. I didn't cause this for you, I stated softly. You brought this upon yourself. A week later, we were sitting across from each other at a mediation table. 1 week later, we found ourselves seated opposite each other at a mediation table. Chloe sat by my side, her presence steady and reassuring. While Maria and Greg fidgeted in their chairs, Chloe remained beside me, her presence providing stability and comfort. While Maria and Greg shifted restlessly in their seats, they looked different now, less smug, more uncertain. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. Their appearance had changed. Now they seemed less self-satisfied and more apprehensive. The gravity of their predicament was finally registering with them. The mediator, a calm, middle-aged man with glasses, cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the unauthorized use of Juliana's savings account and determine an appropriate resolution. Juliana, would you like to begin? The mediator, a composed, bespectacled man in his middle years, cleared his throat. Our purpose here is to address the unauthorized access of Juliana's savings account and to reach an agreeable solution. Juliana, would you like to start? I nodded, my voice steady as I laid out the facts. That money was meant for my down payment on a house. I spent years saving it. Maria and Greg emptied the account without my knowledge and used it to pay for a party. When I asked them to pay me back, they refused and mocked me. I'm here to get what's mine. I nodded, my voice unwavering as I presented the facts. That money was intended for the down payment on my house. I dedicated years to saving it. Maria and Greg emptied the account without my awareness and used it to fund a party. When I requested reimbursement, they refused and ridiculed me. I am here to reclaim what rightfully belongs to me. Maria tried to interrupt, but the mediator held up a hand. You'll have your turn, Mrs. Grant. Maria attempted to interject, but the mediator raised a hand. You will have an opportunity to speak, Mrs. Grant? She sank back in her chair, her face tight with anger. She settled back into her chair, her face contorted with anger. When it was her turn to speak, Maria's voice was shaky but defensive. We didn't mean any harm. We thought it was better for the family to celebrate. Juliana's young. She has time to save more. We didn't realize she'd take it this far. When her turn came to speak, Maria's voice was unsteady yet defensive. We didn't intend any harm. We believed it was more beneficial for the family to celebrate. Juliana is young. She has ample time to save more. We didn't anticipate she would pursue this to such an extent. You didn't realize? Chloe cut in, her voice sharp. You drained her account without permission and then dismissed her concerns. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. You weren't aware? Chloe interjected, her voice incisive. You emptied her account without authorization and then disregarded her worries. That's not a miscommunication. That's theft. Greg opened his mouth to argue, but one look from the mediator silenced him. Let's stick to the facts, the mediator said. Based on the evidence, it's clear the funds were intended for Juliana's use. Mrs. Grant, Mr. Grant, you have two options. Repay the full amount immediately or face a civil suit, potentially accompanied by criminal charges. Greg started to object, but a glance from the mediator quieted him. Let's adhere to the facts, the mediator stated. Based on the evidence, it's clear the funds were designated for Juliana's use. Mrs. Grant, Mr. Grant, you have two choices. Either repay the full sum immediately or face a civil lawsuit potentially coupled with criminal charges. Maria's face turned red, her composure cracking. We don't have that kind of money lying around, she snapped. We spent it on the party. Maria's face flushed, her self-control faltering. We don't have that much money readily available, she retorted sharply. We used it for the party. Then you'll need to figure out a way to repay her, the mediator said firmly. Otherwise, we proceed with legal action, then you will need to devise a method to reimburse her. The mediator stated unequivocally, otherwise, we will initiate legal proceedings. For a moment, there was silence. Then Greg leaned forward, his voice low. What if we agree to a payment plan? For a brief moment, silence prevailed. Then Greg leaned in, his voice hushed. What if we agree to a repayment schedule? Chloe raised an eyebrow. That's a start, she said. But Juliana has the final say, Chloe arched an eyebrow. That's a beginning, she said. However, Juliana has the ultimate decision. I looked at them, seeing not the untouchable figures of authority they'd always tried to be, but two flawed, selfish people scrambling to avoid the consequences of their actions. I observed them, perceiving not the invincible authority figures they had always strived to be, but rather two imperfect, self-centered individuals desperately attempting to evade the repercussions of their deeds. A payment plan is fine, I said. Finally, but I want it in writing. And if you miss even one payment, the deal's off. A payment plan is acceptable, I eventually stated. However, I require it in writing, and if you fail to make even a single payment, the agreement is nullified. They nodded reluctantly, their bravado completely gone. They grudgingly nodded, their arrogance completely vanished. As we left the mediation room, Chloe put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said. They won't forget this. As we exited the mediation room, Chloe placed a hand on my shoulder. You performed admirably, she remarked. They will not forget this. Neither would I nor would I. The mediation agreement was signed that same day. And as I walked out of the building, I felt a weight lift off my chest. The mediation agreement was finalized on the same day, and as I exited the building, a burden was lifted from me. It wasn't just about the money anymore, though getting it back was a relief. It was no longer solely about the money, though its retrieval brought relief. It was about standing up for myself. It was about asserting myself. For years, I'd let Maria and Greg take advantage of me, convincing myself that it was easier to stay silent. For years, I had allowed Maria and Greg to exploit me, persuading myself that remaining silent was the simpler option. But not this time. But not on this occasion. This time, I'd made them face the consequences, and they couldn't wriggle out of it. This time, I had forced them to confront the repercussions, and they were unable to escape accountability. Chloe met me at the door, holding a copy of the agreement. They'll be making monthly payments directly into your account, she said, giving me a proud smile. If they so much as, Miss One, were ready to file a lawsuit. Chloe met me at the door, holding a duplicate of the agreement. They will be making regular monthly deposits directly into your account, she stated, offering a proud smile. Should they even miss a single one, we are prepared to initiate legal proceedings. Thanks for everything, Chloe, I said. I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you for all your help, Chloe. I expressed I couldn't have accomplished this without you. You did the hard part, she replied. I just made sure the system worked for you. You did the challenging work, she responded. I simply ensured the system functioned in your favor. The first payment came through a week later, and while it wasn't the full amount, Seeing even a fraction of my savings back in my account was like a balm for my anger. A week later, the initial payment arrived, and though it wasn't the complete sum, seeing even a portion of my savings back in my account was a soothing relief for my anger. Elena came over that evening to celebrate, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. Elena visited that evening to celebrate, bringing pre-prepared food and a bottle of wine. To never letting anyone walk all over you again, she said, raising her glass. To never again allowing anyone to take advantage of you, she declared, raising her glass. To finally standing up for myself, I replied, clinking mine against hers. To finally asserting myself, I responded, clinking my glass against hers. As we talked, I realized how much had changed in the past few weeks. As our conversation continued, I recognized the extent of the changes that had occurred in the preceding weeks. For so long, I'd put Maria and Greg's needs ahead of my own, convincing myself that family obligations outweighed my feelings. For such a long time, I had prioritized Maria and Greg's needs over my own, convincing myself that familial duties superseded my personal feelings. But this experience had shown me that boundaries weren't just important, they were necessary. However, this experience had demonstrated to me that boundaries were not merely significant, they were essential. If I didn't protect my own interests, no one else would. If I failed to safeguard my own interests, no one else would. Maria called. A few days later, her tone hesitant and unusually subdued. Maria telephoned a few days later, her voice uncertain and uncharacteristically quiet. Juliana, I wanted to check in, she said, as if we hadn't just been through a legal battle. Juliana, I wanted to see how you are, she said, as if we hadn't just endured a legal dispute. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before replying. Is this about the payments? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I allowed her words to linger briefly before responding. Is this regarding the payments? I inquired, maintaining an impartial tone. No, she said quickly. I just wanted to see how you're doing. No, she quickly stated. I merely wished to inquire about your well-being. I didn't believe her for a second. I had no faith in her words whatsoever. She wasn't calling out of concern. She was calling because she didn't know how to handle the new dynamic between us. She wasn't calling due to genuine concern. Rather, she was calling because she was unsure how to navigate the altered dynamic in our relationship. For the first time, she couldn't guilt or manipulate me into giving her what she wanted. For the first time, she was unable to coerce or trick me into complying with her desires. I'm doing fine, I said, and I expect the next payment on time. I am doing well, I stated, and I anticipate the next payment will be submitted promptly. There was a pause, and then she sighed. We're family. Juliana, I hope one day you can forgive us. A pause followed, then she sighed. We are family, Juliana. I hope that someday you can pardon us. I didn't respond to that. Forgiveness was a long way off, and it wasn't something she could demand just because it suited her. I offered no reply to that. Forgiveness was a distant prospect, and it wasn't something she could insist upon merely because it was convenient for her. I have to go, I said, ending the call before she could say anything else. I need to leave, I stated, concluding the call before she could utter anything further. over the next few weeks. I started to rebuild not just my savings, but my sense of self. In the subsequent weeks, I began to reconstruct not only my financial reserves, but also my self-identity. I adjusted my budget, picked up a few extra shifts, and focused on the future. I revised my budget, took on additional work shifts, and directed my attention toward the future. The dream of buying my own home was still alive. And while Maria and Greg's payments weren't enough to cover everything, they were a start. The aspiration of purchasing my own home persisted, and although Maria and Greg's payments were insufficient to cover all expenses, they provided a beginning. Every time a payment hit my account, it felt like a small victory, a reminder that I had taken control of my life. Each time a payment was credited to my account, it felt like a minor triumph, a reminder that I had regained agency over my life. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about proving to myself that I was stronger than the people who had tried to take advantage of me. It wasn't about retaliation. It was about fairness, about demonstrating to myself that I was more resilient than those who had attempted to exploit me. And indeed, I was. Months later, as I scrolled through real estate listings, I felt a flicker of hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Months afterward, while browse real estate advertisements, a small spark of hope ignited within me that I hadn't permitted myself to feel in a considerable time. The savings were growing steadily, partly from my own hard work, partly from Maria and Greg's payments. The savings were steadily increasing, due in part to my own diligent efforts, and partly to the payments from Maria and Greg. While the process was slower than I'd planned, the goal of buying my own home was back within reach. Although the process was proceeding more slowly than I had intended, the objective of acquiring my own home was once again attainable. I smiled as I bookmarked a listing for a small but charming house on the outskirts of town. I smiled as I saved. A listing for a small yet appealing house situated on the town's periphery. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, or at least it would be soon. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, or at least it would be soon. And this time, no one would take it away from me. And on this occasion, no one would seize it from me. Maria and Greg continued their payments. Though not without the occasional grumble, Maria and Greg maintained their payments, albeit with intermittent complaints. They tried to negotiate for lower amounts, citing financial strain, but Chloe had shut them down each time. They attempted to bargain for reduced sums, claiming financial hardship, but Chloe consistently rejected their proposals. The terms were clear, and any deviation would result in immediate legal action. The conditions were explicit, and any departure would lead to immediate legal proceedings. They had no choice but to comply. They were left with no alternative but to comply. I didn't hear from them often, which was fine by me. I didn't receive frequent communication from them, which suited me well. When Maria did call, it was usually under the guise of checking in, though her real motive was always clear. When Maria did make contact, it was typically under the pretense of checking in, although her true intention was always evident. "We've learned our lesson," she said during one call. Her voice strained. "I hope we can move past this someday. We have learned from our mistake," she stated during one conversation, her voice tense. I hope we can eventually move beyond this. I didn't bother sugarcoating my response. Moving past this starts with you taking responsibility, Maria, and that means finishing what you started. I didn't bother to soften my response. Moving forward begins with you accepting responsibility, Maria, and that entails completing what you initiated. There was silence on the other end before she muttered a curt goodbye. Silence followed on the other end before she mumbled a brief farewell. I hung up, feeling no guilt. For the first time, I wasn't bending over backward to make someone else feel better at my expense. It was freeing. I ended the call, feeling no remorse. For the first time, I wasn't going out of my way to comfort someone else at my own detriment. It was liberating. That Elena and I celebrated my progress one evening over dinner. Elena and I commemorated my advancements one evening during dinner. As we clinked glasses, she said, "You know, I've never seen you like this so confident. It looks good on you." As our glasses met, she remarked, "You know, I've never observed you this way so it suits you." "Thanks," I said, smiling. I guess I finally realized that standing up for myself doesn't make me a bad person. It just makes me me. "Thank you," I replied, smiling. I suppose I finally understood that asserting myself doesn't make me a negative person. It simply makes me who I am. "And you are pretty awesome," she said with a wink. "And you are quite remarkable," she added with a wink. We laughed. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt perfectly in place. The betrayal, the anger, the fight, it had all been worth it, not just to reclaim my savings, but to reclaim myself. The deception, the rage, the struggle, it had all been worthwhile. Not merely for the recovery of my savings, but for the restoration of my self-worth. A few weeks later, I drove by the house I'd bookmarked. Several weeks later, I drove past the house I had saved. I parked across the street, imagining myself inside, filling it with my things, my life, my future. I parked on the opposite side of the street, envisioning myself within, furnishing it with my possessions, my existence, my future. It wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of everything I'd worked for and everything I'd overcome. It was more than just a house. It represented everything I had strived for and everything I had conquered. As I sat there, I thought about my dad. He'd worked so hard to provide for me, to make sure I had a foundation to build on. As I remained seated, I reflected on my father. He had labored diligently to provide for me, to ensure I had a stable base upon which to build. Marie and Greg had tried to take that from me, but they hadn't succeeded. Maria and Greg had attempted to deprive me of that, but they had failed. I knew he'd be proud, not just of the house I'd soon own, but of the strength I'd found in myself. I knew he would be proud, not only of the house I would soon possess, but also of the inner fortitude I had discovered. I took a deep breath and smiled. This was my life, and it was finally mine to build. I inhaled deeply and smiled. This was my life, and it was finally mine to construct.